Just remember, the stuff presented by this creepy bear is from the Evolution 101 website, written by the Understanding Evolution team. Commentary by Rent-A-Friend2000, that's me.
Stratigraphy provides a sequence of events from which relative dates can be extrapolated.
Extrapolated means, if we can assume that what we've watched for 200 years applies to the other 99.99999% of Earth's history, which we have not observed, then we can come to some conclusions. Here's a chocolate metaphor. According to Mars, there are around 200 M&Ms in a 1-pound bag. If every supposed year of Earth's history was a single M&M, then we've been studying these dating methods for about a 1-pound bag. From those 200 M&Ms, we are making assumptions about the 4 billion M&Ms we have not seen. To put a finer point on it, it's like making deductions from one 1-pound bag about all of the M&Ms which would be sold in a year, more than 20 million pounds. Or, because I love visual metaphors, they have 200 square centimeters of candy that melts in their mouths and not in their hands, enough to cover a large pillow. And from those they will extrapolate the knowledge it takes to make declarations about enough candy to cover an area the size of Memphis, Tennessee. That's what they mean by can be extrapolated. Do I still need to explain why I'm suspicious about these deep time conclusions? Do I? Or are you getting it? You get it? And the fount of knowledge, Wikipedia, says this about stratigraphy. Stratigraphy is a branch of geology which studies rock layers and layering. It is primarily used in the study of sedimentary and layered volcanic rocks. This is where the evolutionary biologists say, proof of evolution? Sure, the geologists have it. And the geologists say, not us, the chemists have it. And the chemists say, why would we have it? Ask the biologists. And after a while, the conspiracy theorists who say we never went to the moon sound completely legit by comparison. Much like the radio dating methods, these geology conclusions are based on a pile of assumptions, the first being that the Earth is billions of years old. Again, the problems with this branch of pseudoscience would take pages, but let me sum up a few key points. The geologic column you see in textbooks representing the alleged billions of years does not exist anywhere in the world. Dig as far as you want in the neighbor's backyard, and the only thing you'll find is what it's like to get arrested. You'll find rock layers everywhere. You'll find different rock layers in different places. But the complete list of rock layers as found in your 5th grade science textbook will elude you like a good Adam Sandler movie, and for the same reason. It doesn't exist. Except Hotel Transylvania. I actually like that quite a bit. You may have heard that there are places on Earth where all the needed rock layers are found. When you take a look at the numbers, I think you'll see that found is the wrong word. It's more accurate to say all the layers are claimed to exist in these locations. But when you take a closer look, you'll see it doesn't change anything. But don't take my word for it.
There are a number of locations on the Earth where all 10 periods of the Phanerozoic geologic column have been assigned. However, this does not mean that the geological column is real. Firstly, the presence or absence of all 10 periods is not the issue, because the thickness of the sediment pile, even in those locations, is only a small fraction, 8 to 16% or less, of the total thickness of the hypothetical geologic column. Without question, most of the column is missing in the field. Secondly, those locations where it has been possible to assign all 10 periods represent less than 0.4% of the Earth's surface, or 1% if the ocean basins are excluded. Obviously it is the exception, rather than the rule, to be able to assign all of the 10 Phanerozoic periods to the sedimentary pile in any one location on the Earth. It does not engender confidence in the reality of the geological column when it is absent 99% of the time.
Imagine someone trying to claim that Green Eggs and Ham is actually a multi-volume epic, the size of Lord of the Rings. Originally it was 2,400 pages long, but somehow, some of the chapters between In a House with a Mouse and In a Box with a Fox have been eroded away. But all of the chapters are represented, and thus the original mega epic can be said to exist in libraries all over the Earth. I do not like it, Sam I am, son of Catus and Hattus, keeper of the flame of Whoville. Cited by many as the best example of the geological record on Earth, the Grand Canyon is a mile-deep collection of layers, which is missing 90+% of the alleged time of evolutionary history. The excuse will be that erosion took away the missing layers, but then the layers which remain have been untouched by erosion of any kind for the thousands of years they supposedly took to form. They are horizontal, flat, and extend for hundreds or even thousands of miles across the continent, yet somehow formed without being burrowed into by plants or animals or dug into by sun, rain, and wind, or rivers and streams. A far more reasonable explanation would be that the layers aren't missing. The millions of years are missing. Like Bigfoot. It just ain't there, people. You can stop looking now. What do we find in lots of those clean layers? Marine invertebrates. The earliest and many of today's best geologists acknowledge the Flood of Noah to be the only event which could make sense of such huge and even rock deposits full of sea creatures. If the list of layers doesn't really exist, how do we determine the age of the rock layers we do have? We use index fossils. This means, if the rock has a fossil in it which is 300 million years old, the rock must be 300 million years old. How do we know the fossil is 300 million years old? Simple. We find it in rock which is 300 million years old. This is where you expect me to say something about radiometric dating methods. Okay, here you go. They almost never have anything to do with this. Because radio dating is expensive and shoddy at best, most people never radio date their fossil finds. Since radio dating methods are only used on volcanic rock, but fossils are found in sedimentary rock, you can't actually radio date fossils or the rock they're found in anyway. They use this index fossil method of dating the fossil by the rock, and dating the rock by the fossil. If you need an example of circular reasoning, you won't find a better one than this.
Molecular clocks allow scientists to use the amount of genetic divergence between organisms to extrapolate backwards to estimate dates.
Okay, maybe this example of circular reasoning is as good as the last. Here's how it works. We assume evolution has happened over millions and millions of years. Do you see how many of these proofs for evolution require you to believe evolution at the start? Then we take two animals on the phylogenetic charts, see speculative guesswork, and then we see how different the two animals are genetically, divided by the number of years our chart says it's been since those two animals began their evolutionary walk away from each other. This gives us the rate at which they've been evolving. Or we can find some rate of mutation happening today, assume it's been the same for millions of years, even though, by definition, mutations are random. Then, based on our guessing tree, figure out how long it would take to get as many differences as exist between the two different kinds of animal. Let me clarify again. If you start with the evolutionary assumptions, based on unobserved speculative guesswork, you can figure out how fast DNA changes, if your assumptions are correct, and use that to date the amount of time the evolution you started out assuming is fact has allegedly been going on. Do I even need to explain why this isn't science? Let me hit you with a Fabu metaphor. We are in the desert, watching a turtle walk along, and I say, "It's amazing! This turtle is 1,000 years old!"
How do you know?
By observing this turtle, we can see that over the course of a year, his cumulative migration is westward. During his various activities all year, he tends to move more west than east. Thus, each year he moves his home a mile further west.
Yes. That turtle lived a mile east of here last year, and a mile east of the prior year.
Yes, and because we know he started on the east coast, 1,000 miles from here, we know he is 1,000 years old.
Hold on. How do we know he started on the east coast?
Because he's been moving west for 1,000 years. At this point, even the turtle rolls his eyes. Before we leave molecular clocks, let me point out something which they will be addressing in a few chapters. Or rather, they will be glossing over. There are species which do not change at all for long periods, as they interpret the fossil record. We call this stasis, and we call those species living fossils. The horseshoe crab, for instance, has apparently not changed, on the evolutionary model and timescale, for 500 million years. Whatever assumptions you need to make to use the molecular clocks mean nothing when a 500 million year old crab goes walking by. It seems that clock has a massive snooze button, and this crab has been pounding that button for eons. Since I'm already up, I'm gonna grab a bag of M&Ms and watch Hotel Transylvania. And blah, I see you next week, blah, blah.